Hi, good afternoon. I'm Paige Newman, a curator at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, and welcome to Curators at Work. It's a regular series where our curators share our own stories about working with the museum's collections and offer behind the scenes perspectives of the work we do. Curators at Work is part of a vast library of online programs available on our website at virginiahistory.org. It's also available are curated selections of free digital resources, including podcasts, webinars, virtual tours, and hours of recorded lectures. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our members. None of the work we do would be possible without their support. The VMHC does not receive state operating support, and it's through private donations that we're able to preserve and share Virginia's story and offer programs like this. I also want to thank my colleague Haley Fenner for working her magic behind the scenes and assisting me with the program today. As you can see, I'm in my office. The VMHC is open to the public with some exhibits to see. We have Violins of Hope, Capable, Partners in History, and the Story of Virginia. We are still in the middle of construction and excited to fully open in the spring of 2022. That being said, you may hear construction sounds during the program. So let's get started. Welcome to Virginia's Brewed Past. I enjoy doing these types of programs, showing primary sources and objects from the VMHC's collection, especially when I can show off some of the unexpected pieces and a few of my favorites. So sit back, pop a cold one. It's Friday after all, and enjoy. Unfortunately, I can't join you. The closest I can get to beer are either the objects or I am wearing my PBR beer earrings today. So let's go to the next slide. September seems to be a big beer month. And September 7th was National Beer Lovers Day. So hope you got to celebrate that. September 19th is the first day of Oktoberfest. I don't know how many of you have been able to attend Oktoberfest. I was able to go, maybe 10 years ago. Now I can't quite remember because I had such a good time in Munich when I was there. But in honor of Oktoberfest, I would like to show you a beer stein. You can see that. This dates to about 1880s. And I don't know if you can see, it's from the Robert Portner Brewing Company in Alexandria, Virginia. Portner came from Germany to the US in 1853 at the age of 16. Just to give you a little view, here's the bottom. Let's see. In 1861, he opened a grocery store with a partner. Beer was the best seller, so Portner and 3 other individuals started a brewery in an old flour warehouse. The brewery benefited from the Union soldiers' thirst for beer and grew to become one of the largest breweries in the South. And I'll be going back and forth showing you items and also what you'll see on the screen. So again, thanks, Haley, for helping me with this. September 20th is Sour Beer Day. September 27th is Crush a Can Day. And September 28th is Drink a Beer Day and also my birthday. So I don't know if that's coincidence or not. According to the most current information I could find, U.S. beer consumption per adult aged 21 and over is around 28.2 gallons per person per year. The average adult over the age of 21 is consuming about 10 ounces per day, or roughly a 6-pack per week. Virginia averages 26.7 gallons, and the Commonwealth ranks 38th in the U.S., compared to number 1 ranking North Dakota, coming in at an average of 45.8 gallons per person. They like their beer in North Dakota. Okay, next slide. Let's start with a behind-the-scenes shot from a cabinet in our museum object storage. You see Virginia Brewery beer cans, bottles, and glassware, including a pint glass from our Brouhaha event held the first Saturday of August to kick off Virginia Craft Beer Month. Hopefully you got to join us this year, or you have in the past. And my guess is this is what people imagine when I talk about items in our collection. But today I want to change that perception and show you pieces that interest and I hope intrigue you because they intrigue me. Next slide. Virginia's beer history starts with the beginning of Virginia. Drinking alcohol was a way of life for the colonists long before they stepped onto the shores of the James River in 1607. Beer, cider, and other low-alcohol fermented beverages were regularly consumed. The beer makers were usually women or enslaved. Brewing was a routine task. Ale or beer was a household staple for most families in Europe. The drink was an inexpensive way to consume and preserve grains, and beer provided in Europe way to consume and preserve grains, and beer provided an important source of carbohydrates and vitamins. So this image, as you can see, brewing ale or beer, is a page from the Prudence Housewife, which I will show you. It is really one of my favorite rare books we have in the collection because of the frontispiece, and make sure I can get that in there. And you can see the Prudent Housewife. She's calmly plucking feathers from a pheasant while there's some chaos in the kitchen. I don't know if you can see, there's a person trying to, I think, get a cat off the shelf who has just knocked over a pot. There's someone drinking a bottle of beer, maybe wine, and there's a child, and it looks like someone's yelling at the child. But this book is from The Prudent Housewife is the title. It is written by a Mrs. Fisher of England, and the edition we have in our collection is from 1750. And just a little side note, brewing ale or beer, the difference between ale and beer is before hops became widespread in Europe, ale was a beer created without the use of hops. So the next slide is the beginning of a chapter titled Skill in Brewing and Baking. It's another rare book from our collection. It's titled The English Housewife, written in 1615 by Jervis Markham. Markham, he wrote this for, and I quote, contacting the inward and outward virtues which ought to be in a complete woman. Our edition was printed in 1675. What I most enjoy about this, and you can see from the image on the right side of the page, you have diversities of the drinks, which he talks about ale and beer. And he also mentions perry and cider. Perry is a pear cider. He also mentions mead. And he talks more about the commentary of these different drinks, strong beer and like ordinary beer, and more about the traits of an English housewife before he moves on to the recipes themselves. So next slide. So let's get, you can see some manuscripts, which I'm a big fan of. I have worked with manuscripts in my time here at the Virginia Museum, History and Culture. And this recipe is for small beer. And small beer is a low octane content beverage. It was usually probably about 2 or 3% ABV. And this would be a drink that the whole family could enjoy and drink daily, and including children. Grains were often used for repeated mashings, so each batch was less potent and more suitable, especially for younger children. And this small beer recipe is for 21 gallons. And I don't know if you can read some of the ingredients. We'll have molasses and hops and water, of course. And as I read this and think about what, the English housewife or the household servant or enslaved making this, I don't know how I could have done it, especially with 21 gallons and waiting 10 or 12 hours each time. That's why I do not brew my own beer and why I prefer to buy it. So we're working to the next slide. It's another recipe for beer, and it's similar to the small beer recipe with ingredients for the hops and molasses, which I did mention in the small beer. But this recipe also includes a tablespoonful of ginger and 30 grains of allspice to be very, specific about the measurements. And that's another thing, reading through a lot of the recipes, especially brewing recipes for from manuscript collections, is measurements are, it's either very detailed or not. And it surprises me is how successful maybe a lot of people were in creating these recipes. It might have been very either for the individual or the family, but I'm always surprised at the differences, even though the ingredients and how it's done is written fairly, very, the same. The measurements aren't always quite there. So the next recipe we have is for a ginger beer. And this again is similar to the previous recipes, except no allspice is added. And the goal for these is just to give you an idea of the different types of manuscripts, same beautiful script. If you can read it, I enjoy reading that myself, but just to give you an idea what else is in our collection. So our next recipe, since we're nearing fall and it's pumpkin spice season, I thought there might be interest in a recipe for maple beer, which is the middle recipe on the page. A lot of many of our cookbooks from the 17 to 1800s has a variety of recipes. In addition to drink, either brewing for wine or distilling, it includes medicine, say there's spot removers, gardening, etc. If you'll notice at the bottom, there's a recipe or receipt, as it says, which is another word for recipe, for thieves' vinegar, which was used for cleansing the body and probably used as a disinfectant. And I don't know if you can read at the bottom, and once it gives you all the ingredients, the use therefore is to rinse the mouth and wash with under the armpits, neck, shoulders, temples, palms of the hands and feet, and morning and evening, and to smell frequently thereat has its salutary effects. So as we move on, we're going to get into a couple photographs. So this is the Virginia Boat Club team members enjoying pints of beer. The Virginia Boat Club, originally founded as the Olympic Rowing Club in 1876. Virginia Boat Club descends from one of the earliest rowing clubs in the United States. In 1888, the Olympic Rowing Club merged with the Kanawha Rowing Club to form the Virginia Boat Club. Defunct for a number of years in the 20th century, it was reorganized in 1986. So the next photograph, I don't know much information about this photo. I like it because of the home beer, as you see on the sign at the left of the photograph. And I don't know if you've noticed the saloon next door. It's printed on the window. And on the back of the photo is written Shockoe Bottom Flood Scene 1915. And you can see men and boys cleaning up, damage from the water that had been the businesses. Home beer on the sign was a way to advertise that they sold beer made by the Home Brewing Company. And the Home Brewing Company grew out of the Peter Stump Brewing Company, when Stump retired from the business in 1897. So this next item is one of my favorites in the collection. It's a framed scarf printed by Peck and Peck concerning Prohibition. It shows a marching band of 2 male drummers and a female flutist or flautist. The design is like that of the Revolutionary War drummers, and even though they're in their 20th century dress. The 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors for beverage purposes. Virginia was the second state to ratify or formally sign in January 1918, but eager Virginia went dry in November of 1916, 3 years before national prohibition began in 1919. The next one, we're gonna revisit the Home Brewing Company again. So this is a shot from the booth at the Virginia State Fair in 1913. The sign reads, I don't know if you're able to see it, the sign reads, Home Brewing Company, select beers for table or medicinal uses. So in the middle of the booth, a table is set for dinner, and in the center of the table is a beer bottle suspended with beer pouring out. clearly fake, but still looks impressive. And then the small table closer, it's sort of on the left hand of the side of the photograph. It looks like just stacks of probably maybe pamphlets or advertisements and coasters. But I love the framing of this photo personally, and anything that mentions beer for medicinal uses, I'm always a fan of. So this rolls right into our next item, is beer as medicine. This prescription's from one of our manuscript collections, the Roden family papers. It's made out to a Mrs. L.H. Roden. That's her name is at the top left-hand side. Her name is actually Mary Dolly Louise Bridges Roden. She was the wife of Littleton Hewitt Roden. The prescription is dated May 11th, 1933, and Virginia voters ratified the 21st Amendment, repealing Prohibition on October 3rd, 1933. I wish I knew more. Maybe down the road I will know more about this prescription or how the Roden family sort of fit in here. I did process the Roden family collection, but this is really the only thing that had what was related to Prohibition. So I'm hoping to find out more. And as we have a few of these types of prescriptions for alcohol, typically for whiskey was used during Prohibition, I haven't really seen many of the beer ones like the one you see here. So I'm hoping I'll find more in our collection. So let's go to beer labels and beer cartons. Rich Brow is a familiar name to many if you've lived in Richmond for a while. And Rich Brow was originally a beer brewed by the Home Brewing Company. And this Rich Brow beer carton contains 13 of the original 24 12-ounce brown beer bottles, which you will see a little bit later. And the beer label is the 1937 beer label for the Würzburger type of beer. It's a German style Pilsner beer. So the next slide maybe looks a little more familiar. We have some Michelob. It's not a Virginia beer. Michelob is a pale lager that was developed by Adolphus Busch in 1896. But the foil label was made by the Reynolds Metals company, and you'll see that in at the bottom of the advertisement. And we're going to take a look at something related. What we have here is another item from our collection. Get a little closer. Is the Kruger Cream Ale can. And on January 24th, 1935, the first can of beer, in the U.S. was packaged and sold in Richmond. So that's another claim of fame for Richmond. The American can, little history about that, and show the bottom because got some church key notches in there. The American Can Company began experimenting with canned beer in 1909. Make sure you can get a good look at that. G. Kruger Brewing Company, located in New Jersey, had been brewing beer since the mid-1800s, but had suffered from Prohibition and worker strikes. American Can approached Kruger to see if they would partner and to test the beer can and offered to install the canning equipment for free. Instead of risking and losing money with the new product in New Jersey, Kruger chose to use Richmond as a test market, and the canned beer, as a test market for the canned beer product. And I guess we all know that it was a success. Back to the Reynolds. So for the next slide, David Reynolds, the youngest son of Richard, and joined the company in 1937 as a salesman. And his first assignment was to drive a converted trailer around the nation to market aluminum. Reynolds established its can division in 1963, and in the same year developed the first all-aluminum 12-ounce can we enjoy today. As you see, the advertisement on the left is National Bohemian. It's a Pilsner-style beer. It was first brewed by the National Brewing Company in Baltimore, Maryland. When canned beer started becoming popular, Natty Boh, as some of us may call it, was the first brewer to put 6 packs of cans on the market. But while looking at this advertisement, I noticed there's more than 6 cans. And if you can tell, it's an 8-pack of National Bohemian beer. So I don't remember those. Haven't seen those lately. I've seen, we've got our 6, we got our 12, then we have our 18, and in cases, we've got 24s. So we can't talk about beer without mentioning kegs, which is the other advertisement. Stainless steel was introduced in the late 1950s and used for smaller size of casks with the advantage of weighing less than the wooden casks of the same strength. So moving on to the next slide. Back to David Reynolds, and he initiated the first national program to reclaim and recycle aluminum cans and other aluminum packaging at the consumer level. Reynolds Metals pioneered consumer recycling in 1967. Building on this experience, Reynolds opened a center in Los Angeles in March of 1968 that offered cash on the spot for used aluminum. So that is another claim to fame to Richmond. In 1976, Reynolds introduced the Stay on Tab, which you can see in the advertisements, which was recognized as a positive alternative to the pulled tab litter that was found from, I don't have an example because we have the church key, which is showing you the bottom, but some of you may remember the pull tabs, which pull it off and either hopefully would make in the trash, but a lot didn't, hence the invention of the Stay On tab from Reynolds. So other items in our collection, we'll move on to tap handles. So Smart Mouth Brewing Company is a Norfolk brewery founded by Porter Hardy in 2012. Its headquarters is in Norfolk, and in Virginia Beach, they have the Pilot House, home to a small batch brewing system, tasting room, and private event space. The other tap we have in our collection is from Parkway Brewing Company. That is located in Salem, right off the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is in the heart of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. Parkway was established in 2012. The tap handle you see is for Factory Girl, an IPA session beer. Let me show you another tap handle from Parkway that we have in our collection. It's for their Get Bent beer. And these 2 beer handles were handmade by local artist and woodworker Genesis Chapman, who's a native of Bent Mountain, Virginia. Because talking about the tap handles and the sort of the handcraft of certain tap handles also brings in, I don't have many examples or contemporary examples of the label. The beer label art and the beer can art of today is really impressive. But unfortunately, I know we'll get other donations and we'll have more examples of that. So the next time I do the program in the future, I will start talking about those. So moving on to the next slide, I wanted to bring up Rich Brow again. And this is one of the beer bottles that was in the carton, the Rich Brow beer carton you saw earlier. And as I mentioned, it's a familiar name to many on the Richmond beer scene. In addition to being a beer made from home brewing company, if you've been in Richmond long enough, in 1994, the Rich Brown Brewing Company opened in Shockoe Slip as a brewery and restaurant and was one of the few breweries in Richmond in the 1990s. It operated for 17 years before closing its door in 2010. Now, forward about 9 years, in July of 2019, Rich Brow Brewing opened in Shockoe Bottom. It's a name, I love it because it's a name revival, and it's sort of the 3rd iteration of one of the area's oldest beer brands. So it's a perfect example of history repeating itself in a good way. So a few other things to show you. As I'm showing you, I hope that you'll be adding some comments or have questions or maybe some of your own stories you would like to share with the program. Next up is, now we're talking about Rich Brow. I found this in the collection. It's a letter opener and a knife. So there, I couldn't get that part out, excuse me. But here's the letter opener. And as you can see, it says, once always, favored for its flavor, rich brow beer. They definitely don't give things like this away in the breweries. We do have nowadays we have magnets and stickers and koozies, which are always great. Another item is a puzzle we have in our collection. It's from a Piedmont premium beer puzzle game. And Piedmont was brewed and bottled by Southern Breweries, which is located in Norfolk. The box holds 9 wooden blocks, hopefully, 9 wooden blocks. And the object of the puzzle is to move the big square block from corner A, I guess, to corner C, without jumping or raising any block from bottom of the box or turning any piece. So not quite sure what year this was, but I'm guessing maybe, and couldn't find much on Piedmont, on Southern Breweries. There is quite a bit, but kind of getting into where the Piedmont premium beer and maybe where this giveaway kind of fit in to which decade, it's a little difficult. So we're going to work on that a little bit more. So these are just a few things from our collection that we have. And I'm hoping that sort of change your perception of beyond glassware and bottles and cans. And I will leave you with this. Currently, Virginia is home to 330 independent craft breweries. I know that will probably change. I mean, there's probably one opening right now, as far as we know. So I'm happy to answer any questions or respond to any comments if you have them.
Hey, Paige.
Hey.
So I actually have a question. While folks log into Facebook and YouTube to submit comments, I figured I should kick things off to give folks some time. So you just mentioned that Virginia's craft beer sort of scene is just erupting, right?
Yes.
So in your opinion, why do you think Virginia has this craft beer explosion? What about Virginia is attractive to craft brewers?
Well, I have my own personal reasons because we live here.
I mean, always a good reason.
Always, yes. But talking to various brewers, one, I'm sure, Virginia is just beautiful, historic state. Water has been a factor. I mean, I'm definitely, when it comes to brewing beer, I don't know that much. I enjoy drinking beer and learning about the process. But from talking about brewers, there's water content and how the taste affects where you get your water does definitely affect the taste of the beer, and why certain brewers prefer Southwest Virginia versus Central Virginia to whether that's Richmond or Charlottesville. So that's not a real technical answer, but I could probably do more research and get back to anyone if that's the question, or if someone wants to chime in about what their experience, or a brewer. I'm surprised I don't have any brewer friends on here that could give a more scientific answer to that.
Yeah. Well, I have a follow-up to that because, we just got some of your personal opinion why we think Virginia might be attractive to brewers. So what is your favorite beer-related object or manuscript in our collection? Maybe one of each if you've got one of each.
Oh, one of each. Oh my gosh. I know. And I've actually pulled them out. I have to say, the rare book I showed earlier, and is one of my favorites. And it really is for the frontispiece that I showed, because she is calmly, the Prudence Housewife, just calmly sitting there while there's chaos going around. And the other rare book I showed, and I wish I'd pulled that, because Markham's commentary about how an English housewife should brew is, I mean, I find it funny, and I know it wasn't meant to be at the time, but how on point, the English housewife needed to be, in addition to baking bread, but brewing and having it available, and it had to be good. I think, and maybe the misconception of how all brewers maybe were men. And kind of, thank you, bringing the fact that and telling a more, inclusive story of women and enslaved that were brewing in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I absolutely love this rare book and this piece. And especially because it does help tell the story of people who you kind of have to look between the lines and look you have to be really, you have to really investigate sort of the in-between to find some of these stories. Like this was obviously a book for a female market, and there's an entire section for pickling, preserving, and brewing. Absolutely. And it's for your health. You have to brew for your health, right?
It is for your health. And you can, it's like the treasures of medicine. Yes, it's always for your health. And it really was thought to be. I mean, whether and more than beer, wine, fruit wines and whiskey, they are really prescribed for medicinal purposes in addition to, and I think also, even though we did, beer and alcohol were drunk quite a bit because, I mean, water, not all water was suitable to drink.
Right.
And that might be another misconception. There was good water out there, but, people did enjoy the taste of alcohol.
Right.
As much as things change, they stay the same.
No, for sure.
Yeah. And then what also, and I didn't really show, I don't have many manuscripts. I can't really show those as nicely as some of the objects, but I think the variety of recipes in the manuscripts and where they show up is also a surprise, because you think, well, this is a cookbook, this will contain all the recipes, but we found different recipes in, say, school books, and people have, they've torn out newspaper clippings with recipes and either written in their own ingredients or making that recipe better, and how these things were important enough to keep, a book that maybe was just a scratch book and really from the 1800s, it was kept through the family and then donated to us in the 20th century. And to think that this was important enough to be kept. And then we look at it and we're like, well, that's some recipes for some cookies and some, how to cook meat and then make beer. But really looking at that, like the family history of, transferring that knowledge of either brewing, baking, and pretty much, including genealogical information, just a book of all trades in a way, if you will.
Yeah, that is so cool. Paige, I did not realize that you guys had found recipes and things like that. For me, I always think, it's in print, or maybe it's in a handwritten, hand-bound recipe book. Like it's going to be exclusively in there. And full confession, when I've looked for them in our collections, I haven't even thought to expand my search terms to look into other spaces. So, building on that, you mentioned this idea of like sort of passing this knowledge down and sort of continuing the tradition of brewing. I know that part of things like Brouhaha and what other breweries are doing is incorporating historic recipes into what they're currently making. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I could actually, what I failed to mention was our History on Tap programs in the past. That was started, to give a shout out to former colleagues, Greg Hansard and Jameson Davis. It was, if I can remember correctly, 2014, I believe. We approached Ardent Brewery about recreating an historic recipe. And they were agreeable, thank goodness, and agreed to do a persimmon beer recipe. And just to follow Tom Sullivan, who's the Brewed at this time at 2014, he actually was the one that helped brew the persimmon beer, to watch the process of him mashing the persimmons and just working through how persimmons aren't that easy to mash and get make a beer from. And also how adherent they were to the historic aspect of recipes and how they respected the history of brewing. And it's really opened my eyes to what craft brewers understand and understand these different parts of history and how they want to incorporate them into their like contemporary, what's going on today, and having other people taste what yesterday beers could have tasted like. And in addition to Ardent, there was Blue Bee Cider. We've worked with them. And then Blackheath Meadery. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I remember you've actually got a blog post about that persimmon beer, so people can browse our blog and see some of that. I think there's also some information about Blue Bee and that partnership too.
Yes, which was great. And again, working with Courtney Malley and her team at Blue Bee, again, adhering to really the historic aspect of the recipe, and just figuring out, I know we were trying to figure out the type of yeast with doing the cider. They ended up, I forget exactly what the recipe called for, which type of sugar. They ended up getting raisins, I think, from South Carolina, as close as they could to maybe figure out, well, in the 18th century, they probably would have come from here. And so I guess really following as close as they could to the recipe. And with Bill at Blackheath, Bill Cavender at Blackheath, just learning the process of making mead also, because as a consumer, mostly a consumer, and just learning through these programs, the intricate process of creating something that we sort of take for granted, that we just buy, purchase off the shelf, but seeing the crafting, the handcrafting of it, here we go, is really impressive, and it really gives you definitely I'm losing my words at the moment, just a more appreciation for the craft.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I remember at some points, like what you were saying, like the sourcing the materials, like how do you even find some of this stuff, or what did they even mean? Like,
right.
What are some of these things? Like, it's like you guys have to be like scientists and historians and brewers, just sort of all at once. And how have you been impressed with the taste of these historic brews, or are you more of a modern beer drinker?
I guess both. I'll taste them all. I'm actually really impressed, and I do also want to mention the brewers we've worked with during Brouhaha and the VIP programs we've had for Brouhaha. They are brewers, they are scientists, they are historians, and it just, I'm just amazed at how their creativity, how they've come up, and the different types of brewing processes. How much you can do with one, like a small batch to a huge batch, and what ingredients can be added, like at the beginning and after. And maybe that's just common sense, when I talk to home brewers or brewers, but.
I mean, you have to be a brewer for that to be common sense, because that sounds like magic to me.
Exactly. And I guess you got to learn from somewhere, but reading one of those historic recipes and then trying to apply that in real life, no.
Yeah, it's not, so it doesn't necessarily translate immediately, right? Like you still have to have some of that skill and other knowledge passed down. Like it's not a start to finish. First pull out your mixer, then get this.
Right. Now get your, big old bowl and start your fire, and then just get your turn-ins.
It should be this temperature. Like a lot of that has gotten really precise, and like, those guys know it, but we certainly do not.
No. Yeah, I'm trying to think I love this. Another part why I love to focus on, drinking, alcohol, history is like food and foodways. It's a very approachable way to learn history.
Yeah.
It's something that in our everyday daily life, and that's what makes it kind of more comfortable and approachable to learn, and you can apply it to your own life. And hopefully that's what, in my mind, it works. And I retain more information that way. I can definitely associate that with my own life. So that's why I really love to focus on these types of primary sources and this topic and subject matter.
Yeah, it's always so nice to be able to find something that you can relate to, or that you've had a personal experience with, or just something that's interesting beyond like a timeline, or like just dates and names, like, oh, this is a personal story. This was a part of somebody's everyday. It's a part of their leisure, like looking at food and food ways, and drink ways. I mean, they all play into it.
Drink ways. Did you just make that up?
I did. I made it up.
I like it. We're gonna have to coin that.
Trademark.
I like that. Because I mean, and also it's something I can, after we're done this program, I can head over to a brewery, and it's something I can experience, and I call it research, and I'm halfway joking, but going to each brewery and brewer, they've got their own take on it, and it's finding they specialize in certain types of beer. There's so many different types of beer, and and this may have happened past centuries, but what I've seen from different recipes, I haven't really noticed it. So, but if someone wants to correct me, please. What we're seeing, I feel currently in 21st century, is a real collaboration between beer, wine, and spirits, and working together to either collaborate on a drink, or using wine barrels to make beer.
Oh yeah.
Cider. I mean, I love the collaboration of it all, and the different tastes and experiences that you can get from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
And
I don't look like we have too many questions, so I'm gonna ask you to give us one last take. So what is a recipe or a trend that you've seen in historic recipes that you'd like to see come up next? Like, what's like the recipe that you found that you can't wait for a brewery to get their hands on?
Actually, there was one when we were working with Ardent. It's a spruce beer, and actually Bill Cavender too, with Blackheath Meadery. A spruce beer to me, it tastes like pine sol, but I know that's not what it's supposed to taste like. But I would like to actually have a good spruce beer. I want to say that, and of course, let's see. I don't think they have a spruce beer recipe in this rare book, but I wish I could remember the ingredients off the top of my head. But I can't. But there's something, it's just a real pungent. If you're not a fan of IPAs, I'm a fan of IPAs. It's something that you might be into because it's a real pungent taste. But I'd like to have a decent, I guess, spruce beer. And I hate
one that's a little more palatable than pine sol.
And maybe for my palate, but that would be one. But also, I'd love to see more collaborative efforts between sort of a mix, mixing spirits and beers, and wines and ciders and meads. Just love seeing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're deep in research for that. So
I am. Yes. So this didn't mean to speed the program up, but I can hear below that the construction workers took a break, and now I can start hearing them.
Yes.
Doing drilling. Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah.
So, not to speed it along, but, construction, I guess. But I wanted to, thank everyone for joining us and me. If you have questions, feel free to contact me at pnewman@virginiahistory.org. Any comments are welcome. And thank you so much. Wishing you a happy Friday and a great weekend. And cheers to you.